Earthquakes are devastating. Sadly, they're not going away anytime soon. The only great prevention is noticing it on time. That's exactly the case for the San Andreas Fault that could be hitting South Andras soon. To learn more about how dangerous this fault is, watch this video till the end. Formed by a transform boundary, the San Andreas Fault is an American sliding boundary between the Pacific and North American plates, slicing California into two in the process, from Mendocino to the Mexican border. The Pacific Plate hosts such big cities as San Diego, Los Angeles, and Big Sur. Its counterpart, the North American Plate, hosts San Francisco, Sacramento, and the Sierra Nevada. With the degree of quakes different from place to place, its motion is a right-lateral strike slip. The fault is known for being the home of heavy and dangerous earthquake strikes. The first one roared to life in 1857, killing 2 people. Since then, it has known many more, with 1906 being the real killer. Very much recent and thought to be on the San Andreas Fault, it is often called the deadliest in American history, claiming the lives of about 3,000 people in the process, a number that, when you search deep into your heart, makes someone remember 9/11. For a while, the fault has known peace, but the problem is, does this peace suggest the earthquake is no longer a problem, or that a big calamity is imminent? Thomas Jordan, the Southern California Earthquake Center director, thinks the answer is even bigger than yes, a very big yes, and the whole of California is already in a panic. Known for being a quake area on a normal day, not many Californians will shudder before the possibility of a quake. But the fact that this one is said to be occurring in the southern part of the fault, which is locked, loaded, and ready to go, excavated the long-buried fear since 2 years after 9/11. Moreover, the fact that Thomas Jordan's statement carries not so much doubt, it is quite straight, clear, evidence-based, and not covered. Let's now consider why his prediction is that weighty and why we should believe him. But first, do you know that a fault like the San Andreas should be releasing stress, mostly in the form of quakes, at least once in a while? The first reason for Jordan's statement is that the San Andreas Fault has not released stress. Since 1857, no major stress release that has no iota of doubt has been recorded in the area, and the stress may be released soon. What makes this likely? You would remember that the San Andreas Fault marks the boundary between the Pacific and the northern plates. Recent research shows that both plates have been approximately moving in the northern direction. While that's not a problem, the real problem is that one has been moving faster than the other, the Pacific Plate. It is a clear sign that the stresses are building, and when they're released, things will be tough. To get what we are clearly saying, you need to know what is happening to the northern region. The Northern Fault ejected its stresses in 1906, a catastrophic strike of about 7.8 magnitudes in the San Francisco Bay Area struck. More than 80 years later, stresses were also released during La Loma Prieta earthquake, which was a 6.9 magnitude. Put in the light of San Andreas, you have a real red zone, although one may want to count the 1994 Northridge event. This has never been accrued to the Southern Fault. As current research shows, it is another fault entirely. Suppose the North has released so much more than 2 times, which is close to this period. It is not sensible to assume that it will not be a dark outburst when the Southern one has been withholding and when it releases. In fact, the name it is called now is the Big Scary One. But just how big will the big one be? One movie tried to show what it would look like, and the producer claimed that they consulted respected scientists. Produced by Beau Flynn and directed by Brad Peyton and Carlton Cuse, San Andreas is a great attempt at representing what an earthquake will be like for the San Andreas Fault. As a movie that posits to be scientifically based, the demolition witnessed in it might be why most Californians are even more afraid than usual. Let's see what San Andreas has in store and put it to the scientific test. In the movie, an earthquake of a magnitude of 9.0 strikes San Andreas. 9.0? Scientifically, This is near to impossible in the concerned part of the world. It does not mean it cannot happen, as some people are more than ready to claim. Rather, it is limited to only special places on Earth, the regions of the Earth where subduction happens. Subduction is a condition that forces one tectonic plate to go under another. That is, one stays on top while the other stays under. For all that we know about Southern California, this is not the case, given that we have two plates sliding past each other instead. Now, back to the 9.0 thing. According to reputable scientists and scientific organizations, the possible maximum earthquake magnitude that can strike along the San Andreas system cannot go beyond a magnitude 8.0. Even more easing, the probability that such a thing could happen in the next 30 years in this region is merely 7%. As we give out this number, we urge you to not think in certainties. We'd rather want you to think in likelihood. For example, that something has 7% of what is happening is not the same thing as not happening. That part still in this region, for an earthquake of magnitude 7.0, only a 75% chance exists that it will strike. Of course, a 75% chance is like a time bomb that can go off anytime. Now, it is very easy to think of 7.0, 8.0, and 9.0 as just within the same rank, especially for the simplicity of the arithmetic. This is not the case. Let us explain. A magnitude of 9.0 releases 32 times more destructive energy than a magnitude of 8.0. Compared to 7.0, the difference is voluptuous, as a magnitude of 9.0 releases about 1,000 times more energy than it. Now that is less of a destruction. Apart from that, the whole sequence of events discussed in the movie is untrue. For instance, they portrayed the San Andreas Fault as beneath the ocean. This needs to be corrected. The San Andreas Fault is not beneath the ocean. For that sake, any slippage along it cannot displace water so that everything will result in a tsunami. As for a chasm opening up, that is also straight from the world of imagination, because the plates are sliding relative to each other rather than away from each other. That is why one should see movies for what they are, movies. Nevertheless, whatever the case may be, whatever the magnitude, there is no denying that none of the three mentioned as likely in the region is desirable, as the devastation will be beyond the ordinary everyday onslaught that we often see. Or it could be one of the first of its kind in America if the 8.0 one strikes. How devastating would the strike of this earthquake be? Let us start by looking into the 1857 Fort Tejon earthquake. It started with a rupture that wickedly swept from near Park Field to Wrightwood, covering a distance of about 300 kilometers. In the Carrizo Plain, horizontal displacements of as much as 9 meters were observed. This resulted in one fatality. Be careful, the fatality does not show that it was less than brutal. That is, it does not mean that it wouldn't have killed more people, but rather, that was the available number present in that area, at least considering the gravity of what we have taken enough of our time to explain. This has caused many to compare it to the San Francisco quake in 1906. As for the San Francisco quake, only the fault break was longer when we mentioned the displacements. Certainly those of 1857 was longer. Loss of property was so heavy to the point of disheartening. You know that the people of this time were not that wealthy. To most people around this area, their farms were their main sources of income, as there was no Silicon Valley. An army base 7 kilometers away mourned some of its distinguishable properties. Moreover, 2 buildings were declared appropriately unsafe, while about 3 were reported extremely damaged, though habitable. Trees were forcibly uprooted about 20 kilometers west, and buildings were destroyed between Fort Tejon and Elizabeth Lake. Unfortunately, 1 woman was killed during the collapse of one abode house in Gorman. Also recorded was a strong shaking of about 1 to 3 minutes. Also, there were seiching, fissuring, sand blows, and hydraulic changes from Sacramento to the Colorado River Delta. In the beds of the Los Angeles, Santa Ana, and Santa Clara rivers, and at Santa Barbara, ground fissures were observed. Sand blows struck at Santa Barbara and in the floorplain of the Santa Clara River too. One report describes sunken trees, possibly associated with the liquefaction in the area between Stockton and Sacramento. A change in the flow stream affected San Diego, Santa Barbara, Isabella, and the south end of San Joaquin Valley. In the Santa Clara Valley in Northern California, changes in the flow of wells were also reported. And the scariest of all, the waters of the Kern, Lake Los Angeles, and Mokelumne rivers overflowed their banks, which could have raised concern about flooding nowadays. We must also mention that aftershocks preceded the main event by 1 to 9 hours. Felt in Marysville south to San Diego and east to Las Vegas, Nevada, many aftershocks also created some problems, but two, one on January 9th and the other on January 16th, were heavy enough to be felt widely. Although histories are good, we cannot project everything from 1857 to the present. As Heraclitus of Ephesus has said, no man passes the same river twice, for he is not the same man and it is not the same river. When we need a new analysis based on possible scenarios, no other hero rose to the cause than the great U.S. Geological Society. To understand the phenomenon and predict the possibility of the coming event, the U.S. Geological Society survey modeled a 7.5 magnitude event with slippage of 2 to 7 meters, all calculatedly chosen to represent the long drought in the release of stress in the fall. Their findings suggest what would be most likely affected in any likelihood case are constructions straddling the fall. Likely for San Andreas, there are not so many such constructions here. No thanks to Alquist-Priolo Fault Zoning Act. That means other things will be affected. So in a place of construction, other things will be affected. Among those are 966 roads, 90 fiber optic cables, 39 gas pipes, and 141 lines. They furthermore stressed that over $33 billion would be spent to recover the lost land if it ever happened. As expected, the money diverted into it would weaken the world economy, as trade might be slightly stagnant. More damagingly, old houses are also susceptible, no matter where they are, but modern houses are not. Not old houses are susceptible, since some of them are secured with modern-day anti-earthquake gadgets. Fire will also follow the earthquake, burning down many places. We know this will happen because it is the same thing that followed the Northern Ridge earthquake. This happened because gas mains and water pipes became severed. In the light of today, that will be wickedly enormous. The present forecast says that the damage from the fire will be more than the damage from the initial shock. As for the number of people who will die, their estimation sets it at 1,800, and that is quite sensible. Then everything will be turning back to normalcy once more. But as soon as the regenerative process begins, dangerous and unheard of aftershocks will begin to frequent the area and its surroundings. The reason for this is that the tectonic plates would have been destabilized. A good model is Christchurch, New Zealand, struck by a 6.2 magnitude event in 2011. Since the event, it has recorded more than 10,000 aftershocks. That is more likely for San Andreas too. This is perhaps the worst that will happen. If nothing is done before the earthquake, Los Angeles may go on to suffer a drought for a while, as 88% of its water is from aqueducts from the Colorado rivers, Owens rivers, and the Sacramento-San Joaquin River Delta, all of which cross the San Andreas Fault about 32 times. If the big one strikes, they should bid their water supply farewell. This is a great problem, and all eyes are on the government and the people of San Andreas to find out what to do because we do not want to be right. We're stopping here today. Thanks for following along. What can be done to prepare for this earthquake? How do you think the government should respond to it? Let us see your thoughts in the comments section below. Please share and subscribe.